Star Trek Into Darkness. This one's like, it ranks lower for me compared to the first movie. Like, I love the first movie. Like, this is probably my favorite J.J. Abrams movie. But yeah, with Star Trek Into Darkness, it just like kind of just like went down a peg. I thought it was really entertaining up to like the ending. But yeah, like right off the bat, just kind of reintroduces the characters into the world. The crew of the Enterprise has that mission with this kind of like native civilization, and the whole conflict of breaching the Prime Directive. The whole kind of like inciting incident is that this planet is about to be destroyed by this volcanic eruption. So Spock is actually in the depths of the volcano and has to unleash this kind of like device that kind of like cools everything and like stops the eruption. But meanwhile, you have like Kirk and Bones running away from the natives and everything, and they have to get back onto the Enterprise, which is actually under the water. And that was actually one of the images that the writers want to have. It was like, wouldn't it be cool if we saw like the Enterprise like rising up from the ocean, and that would cause them breaking the Prime Directive. And the Prime Directive is that they can't expose any kind of future technology to these kind of like native planets and everything, because then that would break their culture and everything, where they're kind of like more like primitive and everything, and then they kind of see this like futuristic technology. Kirk and Bones are like running through the forest. They jump off the cliff into the water that kind of takes them to the Enterprise, and then meanwhile you have Sulu and Uhura on the shuttle that's just above the volcano, and they're about to pull Spock up, and then the cable snaps, and then he's kind of like left in there, and then you have the whole iconic line of like the needs of the many outweigh the needs of a few. So Spock is willing to sacrifice himself in order to prevent them from bringing the Prime Directive, which is a really cool theme. That'll obviously come in later, because obviously I guess I'll just go into right now. This film is very much heavily inspired by Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, and spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, spoiler alert, Spock dies at the end of that one. So with this one, they're kind of trying to kind of set up like, oh, is Spock gonna die at the end of this one, because we're kind of setting up his death early on. But then we have the whole twist later in the end, which I'll get to. Kirk is like no, we're not going to do that. Like, we're going to save you. So they end up beaming him up back into the Enterprise. They're trying to get out in time, but then all the natives who were chasing after Kirk and Bones were like at the edge of that cliff. So then when the Enterprise like rises up and then flies off, obviously they broke the Prime Directive, and then the natives are like all like worshiping the Enterprise. They're drawing it into like the sand and everything. So that kind of sets up the drama from there of like Kirk being brought down a peg, because at first, after the first movie, he's promoted to captain, and then you think, they're going to go on to their 5-year mission, and it's going to be all cool and everything. But then, kind of starts off with Kirk being demoted, being demoted down to first officer, and then Captain Pike, who was in the previous movie, being reinstated as captain of the Enterprise. So, and then Spock is sent off to another ship. So then you have this whole drama from there. And then, we get introduced to the character of John Harrison. He's kind of this terrorist character. He hires this contact, this admiral, to kind of blow up this Starfleet facility in London. And then, that's where the mystery starts from there. And they kind of like see the footage of John Harrison escaping, played by Benedict Cumberbatch. Once all the Starfleet officers are kind of in that council area trying to discuss what they're going to do about John Harrison, John Harrison actually flies past the facility and like shoots everyone. Pike is killed. All these other officers are injured, and that's where the inciting incident occurs, where Spock is reinstated to captain, and then Spock is back on as first officer. Alexander Marcus is the one who kind of gives them the order to kind of go after John Harrison, who was spotted on this Klingon planet of Kronos, and kind of go from there. Take their ship and like fire these torpedoes down at them, and then kind of like this whole mystery of like, okay, do we use these torpedoes? It's kind of sketchy and all that. So like Scotty kind of has this kind of weariness of like, oh, it's like, do we use these torpedoes? So he ends up resigning. The crew of the Enterprise goes to the planet, confronts John Harrison, captures him and all that. And later on we realize that inside these torpedoes are actually John Harrison's people. And then once they capture him and bring him back on the Enterprise, they realize that Admiral Marcus was trying to use these torpedoes to kind of incite this whole war between the Federation and the Klingons and everything. This was kind of be the spark that started that, because of the whole tension between the Federation and the Klingons. They have the whole kind of interrogation scene with John Harrison, who reveals to be Khan, and the whole controversy with that is that, as the movie was being promoted and everything, J.J. Abrams and the crew were saying, "Oh yeah, no, he's not Khan. He's not Khan. He's just John Harrison." So I think that was kind of like a detriment to the movie, where a lot of critics were saying that people would be more excited. They realized beforehand that Benedict Cumberbatch was playing Khan, but I guess they're trying to retain the mystery. So when the whole reveal happens, I guess like it's kind of like 50-50, where like the people who have no idea who Khan is are like, "Oh, okay, that's fine," and the people who love Khan are kind of disappointed, where like on one hand they're like, "Oh cool, it's Khan," but he looks nothing like how he does in the original series, and then and the movie as well, where Khan is played by Ricardo Montalban, who's a Hispanic actor, and I think Khan is supposed to be like an Indian descent character. So I know a lot of like fans were really disappointed by the fact that Khan was played by Benedict Cumberbatch, who's obviously a white actor. So they were kind of upset by the fact that they like whitewashed Star Trek in a way. But I think on the flip side, the writers and J.J. Abrams didn't want to have, since John Harrison is kind of more like a terrorist character, they didn't want to have him be like Indian descent and create more controversy. So they had him be a white character, and so I think either way it just wouldn't have worked. I think it was like the actor who played Sulu, George Takei, who was saying like, it's more important to have, representation in these movies, rather than, trying to, like whitewash everything or, make things like political or whatnot. It's just better to have, just that diversity and everything. And then he said it was kind of like a missed opportunity to not make Khan like Indian descent or, played by a Hispanic actor or an actor of color or something. So yeah, I can definitely see his point, but I can also see, the creator's point of like not trying to make this terrorist character, like of Indian descent, just have more controversy. So I think it would have been cool just to have like just a brand new character, just have Benedict Cumberbatch, obviously he's an amazing actor, just play this really cool, interesting character and everything. But I know the writers were feeling a lot of pressure to kind of live up to the sequels that the Star Trek had in the past, like with Wrath of Khan just being like the most iconic Star Trek movie, drawing aspects from that movie, which I can see why they did that, where like, it's especially with sequels for Star Trek, it's hard to, be original and all that. So they thought that they just do like an homage to Wrath of Khan and take all the plot points from it and mirror it onto this movie. But it's definitely another reason why it kind of pegs low for me, just because like that copy aspect. But anyway, yeah, back to the story. They capture John Harrison, realize that inside the torpedoes was his people, and that Admiral Marcus was going to destroy his people. So they're kind of like, oh, okay, who do we trust? Do we trust Admiral Marcus or do we trust Khan? And then, just before they, figure out what's going on, the USS Vengeance, piloted by Admiral Marcus, comes in, kind of gives the order to, terminate John Harrison and kind of keep the mission going on from there. But then they realize that this whole controversy of like trying to start this whole Federation Klingon war, and that kind of like the battle kind of ensues from there. The USS Vengeance kind of like takes out the warp drive of the USS Enterprise so that it can't get away. So Spock's like, so if we can't fight and we can't flee, like what do we do? So then they have this whole plan of like going on to USS Vengeance and like taking out this kind of like the technology that kind of like restrains the USS Enterprise's warp drive. Kirk and Khan kind of like do that whole space jump onto USS Vengeance and get in, and then they realize as the story goes on that Scotty was actually kind of stowed away in the USS Vengeance, so he was able to take out the technology. They kind of go into kind of like the main bridge. They rescue Alice Eve, who was like beamed up onto the USS Vengeance, and then the whole twist of like they're trying to take in Admiral Marcus, like place him under arrest and all that. But then, Khan, betrays them, kills Admiral Marcus, takes over the ship. He tries to take out the Enterprise. And then both the ships kind of go down after Kirk and Scotty and Alice kind of get back onto the USS Enterprise. Kirk tries to at least try to manually restart the warp core in order for the ship to like rise again. So, he's in the control room, he's hanging on to like one of the pieces and he's like trying to kick it into place. He finally gets it back into place. The Starship Enterprise, is able to be saved while the USS Vengeance kind of like crashes down into Earth. And then we kind of get the whole kind of emotional scene of Kirk, sacrificing himself. He's in like that kind of radiation room, which kind of echoes Wrath of Khan, where Kirk kind of says that line that Spock said earlier. It's like the needs of the many outweigh the needs of a few, and he kind of does like the whole like Vulcan hand sign, and then Spock does the same thing on the window. Kirk dies. Spock has his whole kind of like Khan scene. Goes after Khan, who survived the crash. They're kind of have the whole chase throughout the city. Spock eventually catches up to him. He's like beating him up and all that. And then Uhura beams onto the little platform and tells Spock the news that McCoy discovered is that, Khan has regeneration blood so that they can like inject into Kirk and save his life. So, fight stops there, and then Kirk wakes up. He's back to normal. He's alive and all that. So and yay, they send Khan back to sleep. They place him back into his little kind of pod and everything, and send him back to his planet. Kirk is reinstated as captain, as of the USS Enterprise, and then kind of goes on to his 5-year mission from there. But yeah, that's just like kind of like what I was saying earlier. It's just the ending is just very kind of just derivative of Wrath of Khan. And I would have been okay if like Kirk actually died at the end, like actually died, and we didn't have the whole subplot of this whole super blood regenerative abilities to bring back, because I know you can't kill off Kirk in the second movie, but because he has to be the captain of for the franchise to survive and all this stuff. But I think it would have been really cool for his character, if he actually got killed. He actually sacrificed himself, kind of echoing the first movie where his dad sacrificed himself for his crew. But for this one, at the very end of the second movie, he actually sacrificed himself, and the crew can live on to go on to their 5-year missions and stuff. So I guess that was the only kind of like downside, just like not only like this whole kind of like happy ending and all that, like bringing it back to life, kind of out of nowhere, but also it really just kind of rips off a lot of like Wrath of Khan, isn't really as original, because at the ending of the first movie, kind of sets up, the fact that, the crew of the Enterprise can go on like any adventure that they want to and all that. But then for the second one, it's just like, oh, let's just copy Wrath of Khan and just like, just copy all the plot points from that instead. So yeah, that's kind of like a downside. But I mean, I'm glad they kind of improved, for Star Trek Beyond the third one. J.J. Abrams decided to, do Star Wars instead of more Star Trek, which I think was a good choice. But yeah, it's too bad that they didn't really continue on past Star Trek Beyond, because I know they were trying to do like a fourth one where Kirk actually meets up with his father George, and they kind of like a time travel adventure from there. But yeah, I'm not sure if they'll ever make that one. So yeah, this was kind of like a step down for the Star Trek franchise, and they kind of tried to redeem themselves with Star Trek Beyond, which I thought was pretty good, but they didn't really do much after that. So yeah, it's kind of a bummer that this movie kind of brought this franchise down a little bit, and didn't really reignite the popularity with the films and stuff. I know they have the TV shows now. But yeah, overall I thought like it was a fun movie, a lot of like great visuals, a lot of great action, a lot of like great special effects and everything. But yeah, it was just I wish the story was a little bit better. I know like J.J. Abrams was saying like they didn't really have like a ton of time to like really work on the story like as much as they could have. So, I think they were trying to do this movie like just after the first movie, but because like JJ wanted to do like Super 8, things got pushed back, and not all of the actors were available at the time. There was like a bunch of like production delays, and they couldn't really figure out the story. So JJ felt like they kind of had to rush into the filming of the movie without really kind of combing through the script and making sure like all the logic and plot points were all filled and everything. So yeah, I mean, I guess I understand why it's not as good as the first one. So yeah, it's kind of a bummer, but I'm glad that he kind of moved on to other franchises and stuff, and Star Trek Beyond could have continued on, without him and stuff. But yeah, it's just like I said before, it's kind of a shame, but oh well.